Hey y'all, welcome back to the studio. Okay, so I am going to show you another way to carve in some texture. So I have a tutorial on how to do this taper tumbler using our 6.9-inch taper jig. So what I showed was how to roll in one of our stencils onto the clay slab using a pony roller. So you can see it gives a really nice texture. And if I had a lighter clay and if I had a really great Celadon, something that would pick up these fine details, I would be fine just like this. But because I use heavier glaze and I use a darker clay body, I like to come over the top and carve this pattern in. Now in my last stencil carving tutorial, whoops, that's not even the right size. Let me grab the right size stencil here. So in my last carving tutorial, when I showed you how to do these little mugs over here, I laid the stencil over, taped them on at leather hard, and then I just carved the lines out. But I want to show you another way to do that. So these have set up a little bit long, and I think my Diamond Core V tool would have a little bit of trouble carving into these lines. It would probably skip around a little bit. I'm gonna bring you down just a little bit closer here. I think we would have some trouble with that. So I am gonna use my Diamond Core L3, and this has a football tip, a wide one, and then a smaller tip here. I am gonna use the wider one, and what I'm gonna do is just carve away, use my stencil lines as a guide, and just freehand carve this so I can get this beautifully carved in texture. See how it just takes the glaze and it does really fun things at those deeper points. Okay, and then we have our Alexandria Mountains on the other side of this one. So we're gonna focus on our squiggly sun pattern here today. So I'm just gonna set this off to the side, kind of keep it in view so you can see inspiration for what we're trying to do here. So that's what we're going for. So I have a piece of upholstery foam covered with plastic. This is a dustier job. This is way dustier than if we did this at leather hard. So I want to keep the majority of the clay dust on here. I also have a brush, so instead of blowing off, I can go ahead and just brush this. This is just a way for me to kind of keep the dust contained here. So I am going to start wherever I want, pick a line, okay? And what I usually end up doing is as I go over my texture here, I will take a couple passes depending on how deep I want this line. I typically, carving for myself is more fluid and easier if I'm carving away from my body. So if you saw me switch my positioning, that was there. So there's one pass with my L3 tool. I'm gonna see if I can give you guys a couple different angles here. So this is plenty deep. The lines that I have put in with the stencil are plenty deep to collect glaze here with a Chino or a Celadon, something that really picks up your lines well. But because I want to use a heavier glaze on this tumbler, I'm gonna go ahead and make deeper lines. Now, like I've said before, our stencils are not the law. This is just gonna give you a nice jumping off point. At this stage, if I go outside of these lines, I'm not really worried about it, okay? The glaze will cover up a lot of mistakes, and I kind of like the variety. The stencils are a great option if you were like me and you don't have really proficient ability in freehand drawing. It gives you that outline, and then you can go ahead and come in. So you can still hand carve and have that hand carved quality to your work without having the freehand skills to do so. Now, after doing this for so long, once you get used to the way that your tools work in the clay, you can really explore some more freehand options. But I do like the stencils for a reliable, repeatable pattern that I can still hand carve because that's one of my favorite ways to do my surface decorations. So I'm gonna just take really long straight lines, and I use the term straight loosely, okay? And I'm just following my stencil pattern here. Stencils are a really great way to introduce new texture. It's a great way to get an isolated texture. So I was able to do this big sunburst on a slab. I did a class on clayshare.com. So if you have never been over to Clayshare, head on over there. You can see my free class. I did summer tumblers 2 ways. And then you can see how I use the stencil to lay in this beautiful sunburst on a slab that I rolled out on the slab roller. All right. This can also be done on wheel work. I usually carve in on my wheel work. So you can use the stencils. In my stencil class that I have here, I kind of talk about how to put that texture in. So this kind of takes me back to just being a kid where I'm just following the lines. I think that's kind of where we all start. Some of us stay there. And I'm able, because I'm using a really sharp, nice, high quality sgraffito tool, I'm able to just get really nice, deep impressions, and I'm able to control my line. And because this is a natural pencil grip for me, it's a very simple thing to do. This is a good way to reproduce work. So if you're looking to make a cohesive body where you are wanting to match your design elements, this is a really great way to do that because the stencil gives you repeatable results. And you don't have to kind of rely on the memory of what you did last time. It's already impressed in there. You can play around. I like to play around with different tools. And the design is yours. Even though the design comes in a stencil form, you get to still make your artistic choices. And for me, one of those choices I make is sometimes I leave these sun rays open at the top. I don't close it. And that's just something that I like to do, just to kind of interrupt the pattern a little bit. And then because I'm using this upholstery foam, you can see how much dust I'm collecting on the plastic. It really is a lot easier just to have a collection spot for that. I anchor my hands on, or my arms onto the upholstery foam, and then I'm able to do nice, steady carving work on this. So carving into your clay is a really neat way to give your glaze a path that it wouldn't necessarily take. So you are giving your clay those deeper recessed areas. And when you have variation in clay depth like that, and what you're seeing there is I'm just running into some of my grog that's in my clay, so I'm just gonna work around that. When you give yourself that change in depth, our glaze really does some neat things in those areas, in those recessed areas. I can choose to glaze this sunburst all one color and just let the variation of the glaze bring out the design. Or like you can see in the example I showed, this mug sitting to my left here, I chose to just glaze the sunburst. And I really, really, really isolated that design to just bring that focal point in a bold way. So I think what I'm gonna try to do here with this guy is to just use a glaze that I know breaks really great into texture, and then I'll see what the glaze does over that. This is something you can do. You could probably even do this step with a needle tool. My guess is at that point, you might just have a little bit more to clean up. These are slow processes. Thanks for hanging out. I like hanging out while I'm doing carving like this. I think sometimes we live in this minute and a half editing world. I know I do, for Instagram Reels or for YouTube, for Shorts or for Facebook. You have that 90-second mark that you're trying to hit. And that can be kind of stressful, and it can really take the slow pace out of your work. A lot of what I do is actually really slow because of the carving and the surface decoration, but I have to speed it up and cut it down and condense it for social. So it's nice to have these long form videos. And at this point, if there are any bumps or variations in the clay, I just work around it. And at this point, I kind of went off of the line a little bit. I'll get you closer in there. Maybe you can see that. I don't fuss with areas like that. I just let them be. I think that just gives the glaze just another chance to do something really cool. I will pick up the mug that I have already finished, and I'm gonna show you some areas where I went outside of the lines a little bit and I just left it. And it really wasn't a problem for me. It kind of ended up being a neat design element for that. So here I've lost my stencil a little bit. I'm not worried about that. I'm just gonna find a spot where I'm comfortable and I can see what my pattern did up there, and I'm just gonna make it up. Whatever at the top there, no one is going to know, and you don't have to let people know. I think one of the things that I really had to work on was not pointing out the flaws in my pottery, because honestly, unless it's another pattern, even then, they don't see what you see. So if I've gone off the line, off the beaten path a little bit, I just embrace it. And I try not to point those things out to people. If they notice it, great. If not, great. We sometimes get in our heads how we want the finished product, what we think it's supposed to look like. And we forget that people don't really, they're not in our heads. They don't know what it was supposed to look like. So I'll see that a lot, like when people think that they have glaze fails, but it's actually a really beautiful outcome, a really beautiful glaze that they've come up with. But because it was so different than what they had in their head, they kind of want to trash it. So if I have a glaze or a carving design or anything that just doesn't turn out the way I expected it, I usually just put it on the shelf, and then I'll come back to it. And honestly, I don't know if there's any more than maybe 1 or 2 times that I've come back and been like, yeah, that's definitely for the bin. Okay, so now I've got all of my sunbursts in. How cool is that? Now I have the main part of the sun here. So I'm gonna start at the bottom, see if I can keep you guys in frame here. And I always pick a spot that feels comfortable for my hand, and then I'll follow that natural line there. Had I tried to do this upside down, I would have been going against what was comfortable in hand, and that's how things kind of get messed up. I'm gonna start in the middle, and I'm going to connect those lines. I have a lot of my stencils are nature themed. So a lot of leaves, flowers, vines, this sunrise or sunset. And because they're organic shapes, you can have a little more wiggle room there. I don't do a lot of really rigid geometric work. And I think that just works. That's kind of my personality, is a little more fluid, a little more go with the flow. But also I need a medium that if I make a mistake here and there, it's not gonna cost me the entire piece. All right, so I'm gonna come through and just brush off gently. We don't wanna put a bunch of clay dust into our studio. And there we go. There is just another way to carve in using, let me grab you. This was using our Squiggly Sun stencil. And I think that's just a really neat way to use this stencil. This is past leather hard. This is not quite bone dry. Some areas you can see my rim is really dry. So I'm not sure what the area between leather hard and bone dry is called. I'm gonna just wet this a little bit to get rid of some clay dust here. Okay, I'm gonna clean up my lines, but also to give you an idea of what this pattern is gonna look like. And that kind of where white stays, where the dust stays, is kind of going to give you a mimic of what your glaze may do. And testing your glaze is always important, knowing which glaze produces what results. So that is just a way to accentuate the pattern. We use the mountains on the bottom, you can see, and I think I'll just leave those. I don't think I'm going to carve into the bottom. So thanks for stopping by. Thanks for hanging with me while I do this carving. I'm going to do a couple more. I hope you are enjoying the surface decoration techniques that I've been sharing with you. Surface decoration is really just my favorite part. So apart from building and using the molds, the jigs, I also like to put in some extra. All right, y'all. Let me know if you have ever tried carving in with a stencil. I would love to hear from you about that. We'll catch you next time.